Hi. Hi, everyone. Good night, or good evening, or afternoon, or good morning, depending on where you are in the world. Thank you all for being here. We'll get everyone some time to log in before I introduce our wonderful host. I'm so happy you're excited. How's everyone's day has been going so far? Busy. I felt that. Very busy. How's tax day? Our favorite question since today is tax day. So I don't know. Today felt like a Monday. I'm not sure if it was just me. Okay. I'm glad TurboTax exists. That's funny. Working until midnight. Oh no. Well, I hope midnight comes fast and that you get some rest. Resume recording. Thank you guys for coming, especially on a busy Tuesday night. I appreciate you. Happy tax day. Today we have our wonderful host, Yolanda Goodwin, who is an expert in financial literacy. I will let her introduce herself and I'll let her take it away.
Thank you, Kimmy, and thank you everyone for joining us. I can't see you, so I hope to later on today in the evening kind of get your faces and kind of capture everyone who's here. I'm Yolanda Goodwin. I am a retirement consultant. I've been working in finance or financial planning for about 6 years. What kind of brought me to this space was I left a job and went to France for 6 months. And while I was there, you meet all of these amazing people, and some of them are retired. And I started thinking, I need to learn more about money firsthand so that I could be one of these people and retire and meander the valleys of France someday. So in my journey, I learned a lot of this stuff firsthand. And I just thought if I could share this with everyone, as many people, what I'm discovering, what I'm finding, I think it would certainly even the playing field some. So the purpose of today is not to give you advice, but it is to offer you some perspective, what I think that would impact your success as professionals, but also as pillars in your family. If you are an undergraduate and you're here, congratulations, confetti. You are ahead of the ball. So I commend your ability to be curious, to have some desire to take control of your financial life early. If you're not an undergraduate, I definitely hope that you have something that you take from this that is going to either help you or someone that you love elevate. Some of the takeaways that you'll see today, we're going to talk through. I want to make sure that you have a set of written short and long-term goals. I want to show you what a snapshot of your savings design might look like. I want to have a starting place for you to be able to go into a conversation with some type of financial professional, personal banker, financial planner, accountant, whoever that might be. Your disclaimer today, no financial situation is ever going to be alike because your goals are different. So you always want to consult with a tax professional on any strategy or exception that you want to explore. When it comes to, and I love that we're doing this on tax day. Thank you, Kimmy. But any penalties or taxes that can occur whenever you move money out of a retirement account or out of some type of financial product, it can have really serious consequences. So I'm not here to provide you advice on what your unique situation warrants, but I do want to make sure that you have a space and a place that you can advocate for yourself. So today on the agenda, I want to kind of touch base on a bunch of different items, to be quite frank with you. I want to make sure that we have something in place that you can do to influence a positive outcome for yourself. Some of these bullet points, behavior finance, for example, employer benefits, exploring your greatest asset. I want to touch on those, and then I'll have an activity that you'll be able to kind of continue to use. Because it's such a big topic, I'm not going to be discussing investing. Quite frankly, a lot of this is really the basis of it, developing some type of philosophy when it comes to what you want to save or why you need to save. If you do want my opinion on that, my opinion is going to be first protect what you've got, then optimize what you've got, and find someone to help you save appropriately. That is my favorite quote, by the way. May your choices reflect your hopes and not your fears. Should you take this advice today, you will be in a position long-term to always have choices. And that is my goal for anyone that I ever come across, my clients as well. So jumping in, this is the first challenge. So women earn 83 cents on the dollar for every man. And ultimately what that means is that we are going to have a loss of $2,700 in annual savings. So each year, $2,700 less saved. In our lifetime, that's $300,000 of opportunity lost. That wealth gap, you're going to notice I'm specifying women because a lot of the data is about women versus men. But just in the perspective, if you identify any other way besides cis male or cis female, this is kind of where you're going to also probably fall theoretically. So I think that's important for you as well. And here's how it looks. You've got Norm and you've got you. Norm's saving 10% of his 401k just like you, but because he earns more, he gets to put away $10,000. His company match that gives him 50%, he gets $5,000, and you only get just over 4,100. If you're both getting the same rate of return, that same amount of profit back, essentially, even in the end, he's going to come out earning and saving a lot more than you are. And this is US Census Bureau data. So here's what we know. It's often about behavior finance. This is my favorite subtopic of financial planning. We want to understand why we behave the way we do in order to gain that new understanding of money management. So my best example for you is if I were walking down the street and we didn't know each other, or maybe even if we knew each other, and I asked you, what's in your savings account? Your first reaction is very uncomfortable. It might be, why are you asking me this personal question? People usually get some level of defensive. They might even have like a backstory to share of like what happened with their checking and their savings. But there's always some behavior that drives it. And what it is that we want to be rational. We make smart choices. We complete our degrees. We get these certifications. We're learning. We're applying. We're choosing the right career. We're choosing the right financial products. We're choosing the right levels of savings. But then in the end, we're just human. So we're prone to desire and error and irrationality and emotions. So even though we would never behave one way with something in life, you know, our career choices, how we raise our children, the friends that we make, we can walk through the mall and see something and it just goes out the window because we had a bad day. They call it retail therapy. That's why it's a thing, because of our behavior. So ultimately, we also have a behavior that I find in financial planning that we can give up really easy when we don't understand something. We can very quickly say like, oh, that's out of my scope. My partner handles that, or I have, you know, this person in my life that does that, or I don't need to do that. I'll get around to that next time or later when it's important to me. We're very quick to dismiss things if we decide it's just too complicated to understand. So what I want you to take from this is recognizing if you are a person in life that is responsible and organized and thoughtful, really take that time, lean in on yourself, and really ask yourself, when it comes to my money and the choices that I make, I can be generous in one space, but I can be lacking generosity in other spaces. I might be a person who likes to loan money, but I'd never take out any debt. What makes me loan money to people? So it's really looking at yourself and understanding, why do we behave that way? We get an inheritance or we win the lottery. It's an emotional response, and most of the time people spend it. So your best chance when it comes to financial planning is keeping a simple and intentional plan. Less can be more if you can stick to it. You don't need to be an expert in finance. You only need to be an expert in your own money. And the objective is to have that freedom to choose. So if you can take some level of delayed gratification, sort of like going to college and waiting on a degree, that's the same idea. If you can go to the gym or if you can eat right, it's the same thing. It's just working that small muscle over time to create a better habit. You're going to love the next topic. Credit and debt. I love this because the sunflowers makes this feel like an excellent and beautiful and flowery conversation, and I want it to be. Behavior finance. When we get to this topic, culturally speaking, we fall back sometimes, but everything in finance is just a tool. Everything has pros and cons. You just need to learn how to leverage them, how they fit in your own life. So credit essentially is your ability to borrow money, your ability to get a loan, a mortgage, a credit card, a student loan. It's also your ability to repay, which affords you the ability to have more leverage. So you repaying these debts today, these smaller debts, whatever that might be, that's what gets your credit limit increase. That's what allows banks or other lenders to consider you a reliable person. On the other side of that is debt. The debt is the liability that you owe in life, but some of this debt is also inheritable. So if you have consumer debt, credit cards, medical debt, when you pass away, that debt doesn't die with you. That debt moves on to your estate or to your next of kin. So it's important that if you have debt, you address that. God forbid we stepped away yesterday. You want to think of that. If I left yesterday, what would that burden have been that I left on my family? So taking that step back also is saying that you want to think of how you're going to leverage the debt. Most lenders are looking for a debt to income ratio that's within 30%. And that's saying that this is a person who could probably borrow. If it's higher than that, they will probably view you as a person that might have a challenge with repayment. So those are things that you want to think about when you're getting into choosing credit cards, choosing lenders, choosing the behaviors that you're going to have on some of these long-term goals. And I have a couple of tips for you. Pay your bills on time. It's always awesome. Pay them early if you could also. Your credit utilization, so how much you are taking up on that line of credit. If they offer you $5,000, you don't need to spend $5,000. There's a myth that you should keep 30 or 20% on that. That's a myth. Why would you pay interest on something that you could just pay off? So you do want to pay that off, but you want to pay it off every month. You want to increase the age of your credit. So that's saying that first credit card, that first line of credit that you might have had, even if you don't use it, that's something that's increasing your credit score, having that longevity. So you don't necessarily want to close out something just because you're not using it. Building a mix of credit. So not just having a ton of credit card on one side or a ton of mortgages on another side. Having a mixture of debt that shows that you're a balanced borrower. Your credit limit requests, you can always increase those if you wanted to. It's something you can always ask for. You can also always ask your credit company to lower your interest rate. So there's nothing wrong with reaching out, saying, I've been in repayment for a while. I noticed my interest rate's still pretty high. What else could you do? What else could be out there for me? So it's a good conversation to have. And then finally, try a side hustle. Anything that you can do to create a little bit more capital or a little bit bigger of a cushion. It's definitely going to help you when it comes to how much debt you may need to borrow or how much credit you may need to take out. So that could be a really good tool when it comes to managing the debt. Managing the debt is creating the plan to repay it. So you want to use someone, in my opinion, that is experienced in that, licensed. You probably want to be cautious of credit repair. If it's not something that you can seek any type of fiduciary advice from, and fiduciary means someone who's looking to give you advice based on your best interest. That would be a financial advisor, that would be a CPA, that would be an attorney. You probably want to take advice from someone who's licensed to speak in that space as well. But there are a lot of solutions, you just have to explore them, and that ultimately will open up some other opportunities. So more challenges. So the other piece is that women tend to be caregivers 66% of the time compared to men. So what that means is that if we were to come out of work because we have to take care of a parent, a grandparent, a sibling, a person with a disability, a child, a spouse, our families generally look to us. I want to point out something that I discovered that I thought was interesting. I actually went looking one day to see what was the disparity between Black and white households when it came to long-term care. And it actually showed me that there really wasn't one. The disparity comes with the Hispanic woman. The studies say that a woman that is Latina, that is over 70, is more likely to be widowed or single, and she's more likely to look within her household or within her family for help. And because of that, it eats into the family's wealth. So that is just a cultural piece, and I think a lot of our families are that way. But it's unique, and I think it's worth having a conversation about. So if you look at your family and you see that, doesn't matter if you're Latino or not, you probably want to have a conversation with a financial planner about it. You know, I'm looking at my parents' situation. If their health failed, you know, what would happen? And what this illustrates for you is that, you know, if Norm is able to stay at work, he works his regular, you know, age 65 retirement, he saves $1.5 million. Because you have 2 years that you come out of work being a caregiver, those 2 years alone, without putting in money into a 401k, without putting money into a retirement account, those 2 years end up creating a shortage of $500,000 compared to Norm. The rule of 72 is saying, how long does it take my money to double based off of the rate of interest or the profit that I'm receiving? So the money that you put in today into your accounts, it's going to sit in the market and compound over time, and it's going to grow. And in theory, that money that you put in the market when you're 30, it's actually more valuable than the dollars that you're going to put in when you're 60. So it's very important that you're able to, in your working years, stay at work if you can, put money into your 401k, get your employer match if you can, because those are those small things that in society we're just generally faced with. So a couple of things that I do want to touch on. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this, but I know that it's so important because it's really the source or the foundation of a lot of your financial circumstances is what you depend on from your employer. So your employer provides, before all of these bullets, they provide your income. So you can pay any lifestyle that you might live. They're going to provide your health insurance. So you've got your high deductible health plans, your PPOs, your HMOs. If you are a person who has a HSA or FSA, I hope you're taking advantage. Great tools, but it's a benefit that they offer to you. Dental and vision, your long-term or short-term disability insurance, life insurance that they may offer you. They may offer you a voluntary benefit, so something you pay for that covers specific needs, accidents, hospital, cancers. You might have a retirement plan, which is going to offer you some type of tax incentives, or maybe they offer you some type of planning services. Maybe you get an employer match where they give you money based on what you contribute. There's also, most of us are having an employee assistance program. A lot of us think of that as a behavior health service, but there are legal referrals, there are financial referrals. So if you are not sure, if you're thinking about estate planning and all of these other things, that's a really good place to start. And usually they're already offering a discount of some type. if they're partnered with your employer. So a great place to explore some of the options when it comes to building in and closing up the gaps that your employer is not able to cover for you. I'm going to look in this. I don't see any questions so far. So, okay, we're moving along. So if you don't mind, drop in the chat, what do you think is your greatest asset? If there's one thing in the world that was worth protecting, what would it be? I'll give you a couple of examples. Some people might think, ooh, that's a good one. Time. Let's see, that's a powerful one. Time is a good one. Pin that. So that's something I'd say that's not tangible. Many people will say my house is the largest asset that I have. Some people will say it's my 401k. I've got the most wealth sitting there. I will tell you, your greatest asset is your ability to earn an income. Your drive to hustle, Anna, that's it. So some people say their car, their portfolio, their home, their net worth, the assets minus liability, but it's all about that ability to earn an income. So when you look at your family, your friends, your parents, your children, there's a certain dollar amount that makes their world go round. And you have that dollar amount that you're responsible for. And if you don't bring that dollar amount in, or maybe someone else in the household is the breadwinner, you don't bring that money in, what happens? That money is the only thing that's keeping you really from defaulting on debt, including your student loans if you have them. And the statistic here is 1 in 4 20-year-olds will face a disability before their retirement age. If you experience that disability before you have worked enough years, you may not be insurable for Social Security. If you have a college degree, it's really hard to prove that there's a disability that would keep you from doing anything. So we are, just as an educated population, a group of people with high school degrees, it's tough to get disability with Social Security. So if there was a way to make sure that the world goes round for those people who depend on you, if there was a way to make sure you do not default on that debt so that you can keep yourself ahead, you probably want to insure your income. So your group insurance is going to offer you usually between 40 and 66% or 67% of your income. If the employer offers you that at no cost to you and they pay for it, then that benefit is taxable to you if you use it. So if you are a person who lives at 100% of your income and you experience a disability, your job is going to probably drop you to something like 45% of your income. So your vehicle, your home, your financial portfolio, all of that situation changes. But there's good news. I love to show this to give you an idea of how much money you might earn in your lifetime. So if you're 25 years old, if you start in this left-hand side, I'm gonna try this marker. Ooh, laser pointer. If you are 25 years old, you start earning $30,000. You're gonna earn, by the time you reach 70, about $1,350,000. If you start saving at 32, you'll just save less. But you're still gonna be able to essentially create $1 million wealth. That's what this means. On the other hand, let's say you're 25 and you come out of school and you're making 250,000. you're going to make over $11 million. Many of us don't come out of college making $250. Let's say it takes you a little bit to get to that point. You're still doing pretty well at $9.5 million. So when I say what's your greatest asset to protect, it's probably $9.5 million if that's you. Or if you're that 25-year-old, it's probably $1.35 million that's worth protecting. So how else can you do it? Protect yourself. You can pick up life insurance. Term versus permanent is essentially about the type of insurance. There's different ways to set it up. Term insurance is usually less expensive. It's like renting. So you would essentially purchase a policy that's good for a period of time. After that period of time, you do not have coverage. So if you passed outside of that period, nothing pays. So the idea is that if you have people who depend on you, you have a mortgage, you have student loans, you may need a lot of life insurance while you're younger. When you are 75, 80 years old, if you don't have a mortgage, you don't have little kids, you probably don't have much debt, you probably don't need a ton of life insurance. So it's a really good conversation to bring to an insurance person or a financial advisors. What I would ask them to do is say, I need to right size my death benefit. I want to know how much do I actually need? Not what can I afford, but what do I actually need? It doesn't matter if you can afford it or not. You need to know what your number is. And then you can back into how much you can afford. So right sizing it is saying, I'm going to look at the debt, credit cards, consumer debt, medical debt. I want to cover all of that. And every family and every person's different. If it's not important to you, it's not important to you. Income replacement. I want to make sure if I still have, kids that would be in the household or in college until, 10 years, 15 years from now, I want to make sure I can cover my income for 15 years. Mortgage is just covering the mortgage. That's all it is, or the house we were hoping to buy. So if I passed away, whoever was living in that house doesn't have to move. They don't need to change schools. The family doesn't need to decide on what to do. They have some time if they want to make a change, but they don't have to do it right away because the house is paid off. And the last thing people usually find pretty important is education. And I put in parentheses there, special needs, because that's super important to me. So beyond, what we might want for college, for law school, for medical school, it could also be private school. It could be school, primary school years, secondary school years. In the special needs space, it could be about funding a trust. It could be about taking care of vocational needs. It could be about taking care of housing or caregiver needs. So if that's something that you have going on, you absolutely need to see a financial advisor and you absolutely need to meet with an attorney. So definitely in that case, look for someone, I'd say, in your area, local. If you have someone with special needs to talk about, you probably want to find someone who specializes in that space. I think it's important that it's something they do all the time so that they're always, well-versed on whatever's new or whatever's different today. But these are the ultimate ways that you can protect your greatest assets. When it comes to the cost of insurance, it's really about your health. So they do look at your height and weight. They do look at your health history. I'm going to tell you right now, if you haven't heard it, this is your public service announcement to stop vaping. Your insurance needs are basically, your prices are going to be enormous, essentially, if you are a smoker. And people don't think that it counts, but vaping certainly does count as far as insurance companies are concerned. So any type of tobacco or nicotine use, doesn't matter how you're using it, it's going to certainly impact your pricing. And that's probably the biggest pricing difference. If you use any type of drugs, it can also impact your outcomes. So my best advice to you is cease any of it. Talk to your insurance person, be forthcoming about them. We have a question, do they send you to get a physical? Some companies, their policies, it just depends on the amount. The type of insurance, everyone will be different to determine whether or not you require a physical. But generally speaking, the industry, if it is the case, the agent will set you up with some type of clinic or someone who will come to you. And they'll do that at no cost for you to do the exam. So definitely, if you have questions about it, you want to talk to that insurance agent. Be as transparent as possible, because the best information you can give them is the best that they can prepare you for what might happen. I'm going to pause since that was my first question. Anyone else have questions on life insurance? Another thing I think that's worth mentioning, a lot of the time we think of life insurance as kind of that dark place, what happens when I'm not here anymore. But I do think it's important to kind of rebrand that. Life insurance is about the gift that you can give to somebody that you care about. They may not want it, they may not think they need it, but it is a gift. To be able to give someone choices when you're not here, when they're in their hardest time, it's unmatched. There's also the ability to do charitable giving. So if that's important to you, if you were ever looking for strategies on how to give, that's probably something to talk to your insurance person or your attorney about, because life insurance could be a great tool to use for something like that as well. So it does seem like it's kind of dark, and a lot of the time families don't really want to talk about it. But if I could do one thing to change your outcome, that would be it. I'll talk a little bit on the permanent insurance, and then I'm going to answer that question. Let's see. Permanent insurance is like owning a house. So it's a policy that offers you, of course, if I pass away, something that would pay out a death benefit tax-free. But it also builds equity, kind of like a home. And that cash can also be leveraged in strategies. A lot of people use it in retirement strategy planning. So that's something else. So red flags. There are so many red flags. I think it's important that you understand the financial ratings of the company that you want to use. Is this company going to be here if I don't pass away until I'm 85? Will this company be here? Will my family have to track down how to get this claim paid out? I think it's important that you have a policy that has good financial ratings. I think that it's important to talk about what you need versus your budget, because there are a lot of ways to skin a cat, if you will. But if you needed $1 million in term life insurance, but you were restricted on your budget, I probably wouldn't be recommending something expensive to you. So it's important that you have those conversations of what else is there. A lot of the time you'll see like YouTube videos or TikToks, things like that, and they're selling these kind of get rich quick themed ideas. And it's not saying that they couldn't be done, but I think they mislead the public in how much capital it actually would take to be able to pull off a strategy using something like that. And a lot of people sell them because they're more attractive as far as the price point for you. And they seem as if they could give you a lot of options and choices, but ultimately, a lot of products can be too complicated. And I don't think you need anything too complicated. And I certainly don't think you want anything that would be difficult to actually use when it comes time to do so. Anything that should alert us that the plan we're looking at isn't seeking, that the planner that you're looking at isn't seeking in your best interest. You need to ask them if they're a fiduciary. And just because I sell insurance or I sell investments or I sell something does not make me a fiduciary. You can usually look them up. If it's somebody who sells insurance, you can check your state insurance site. You can look them up. If they sell investments, you can look them up on FINRA broker check. But ultimately, it's talking to them and asking. By law, they won't be lying to you. But we also have disclosures that we have to share with you. So anytime I make any type of transaction or even discuss the possibility, I'm going to always give you those disclosures, and those disclosures are going to help you understand if I have any conflict of interest. You need to know it. I'm a fiduciary. Honestly, when I was working in a private practice, if you wanted to know what commission I was going to get, it's not really appropriate, but it's okay for me to tell you that. You know what I mean? It's just math. So it's not that somebody would be necessarily deceptive. You just have to be able to do your diligence in asking, what else is there? You can ask them, do you offer insurance from any company, or do you only offer insurance from your own company? And they may have a good reason why, and that's okay. So it's just having that conversation, letting them give you those disclosures. And if you have any doubts, it's probably not a good feeling. Don't go with it. But I always think also using your referral network, the people that you know, the people that you live around, work with, ask them who they're working with, how long they've been working with that person. Because everyone has someone they love, they just aren't necessarily sharing them with you. All right. More challenges. So women have higher healthcare needs and healthcare expense costs than our male counterparts. And then we also tend to live longer. So what ends up happening is we pay more on our disability insurance in general. We pay less on our life insurance. We're more likely to experience a disability. We're less likely to pass away prematurely as women. So we end up coming out of work for a disability, maybe we experience a long-term care event. But ultimately our healthcare costs, having a uterus, if you have a uterus, it just is something that a male person doesn't have. So there are gender related, sex related issues, but then there's also just the fact that how society is almost designed. So what that means for us is that here we are working, we're going to save that $1 million. We're going to outlive Norm. Let's get that in my way. Who's going to save his 1.8 million, even though he may not live as long as we have. Most actuarial tables use 92 for men and 95 for women. As our healthcare industry develops and technology develops, I'm sure that the numbers will shift and get a little bit older, but that's just how we are today. All right, I'm gonna talk through. So this is my favorite part here. So there's a lot of things out there that kind of hold us back in society. There's a lot of things that are against us or can kind of downplay a lot of our hopes, if you will. But I think the important piece is that we have the ability to take ownership in achieving our wealth now. We have the ability to take ownership in ending poverty in our families now. So how to do so? You're going to want to avoid consumer debt. Consumerism is pretty much the killer of wealth. You want to address your student loans and your debt payment re-strategy. Everyone has this nasty feeling about student loans. That's okay, pay them. Pay attention to interest rates and promotions. If you can find a better rate, if you can find a better situation or deal that can help you leverage, that's what you want to take that route. You want to repair your credit with good borrowing habits. So don't continue to take more. Have conversations with professionals to find what's the most efficient way to do it. I use a spreadsheet that I literally show my clients. Here is the light on the other side of the tunnel, so they can see exactly how much interest they might pay if they chose to continue to do it their way versus if they took my recommendation. So the math works, follow the math. If you follow the math, you can actually help avoid some of those behavior things that drive us. Using a financial planner or financial advisor is another way to help you separate yourself from some of those emotional or behavior-based attitudes, because they're not tied emotionally to your money. So they're going to be able to tell you something just based on math, just based on how the laws work, and you can make that decision from there, but they can be deeply unbiased on that. When it comes to your income, protect it, and that's going to protect your ability to achieve your goals. When it comes to insurances, and this isn't just life insurance or disability like we talked about, it could be long-term care insurance, it could be your health insurance, it could be your homeowners or your car insurance. Don't cut corners on your coverage. Consider your family and your personal health history. Kind of going back to that life insurance question, I wouldn't say it's a red flag, but everyone's going to ask about your health. And some of the things that are going to come up are very sensitive. They're going to ask you about HIV. They're going to ask you about cancers. They may not ask you about your mental health, but I assure you, if they pull your records, the insurance company is going to check that too, anything that's available to them. So if you disclose those things in your records that about your family history, now an insurance company can see that, right? So be mindful and have those conversations with your doctor. If it's time to get insurance now because you've seen something in your family, go and have that conversation with the insurance person, go and have that conversation with your doctor. I need to get insurance. These are the things that I'm looking to take care of, and let them give you that guidance. But your health history and your family definitely matters. So please stop vaping. Protect your family from financial risk. Protect yourself from your family's financial risk. So that's the other piece. If you have people in your family that are the financial risk, maybe it's them who have these challenges. Well, I really, really hope you can take this conversation back to them. Financial advisors will do family conversations. If you're not sure how they'll take it, just give them a referral. Hey, I met this great advisor out at so-and-so company. They were open to talking to you. Is it okay if I share your information? Don't worry, I already did. But you have to do something. You can't just let those people be that way, because at some point, if you are doing this and you're doing the work and you have it, we depend on you. So you want to make sure, if you can mitigate against that, just have the conversation now, have it often if you need to. And then the last piece is respect the math. If the math says you're coming up short, you're coming up short. If the math says you have more money that you could be saving, you should probably be saving. So goal setting. I want you to write this down. Before the end of the night on this glorious tax day, I'd like you to identify 5 short-term goals, or identify a short-term goal that's 5 years and a long-term goal that's 10 years. Doesn't matter what they are, but short-term and long-term. Over the weekend, I want you to go and take a look and record all of your sources of income. Anything that you have, wages, self-employment, 1099, disability income, anything you've got, interest income, annuity income, calculate all of it, what's coming into the household. And then I want you to also calculate what all you're spending. As you kind of create that budget, or it's going to essentially help you identify, when you're looking at it, what are the things you need versus the things that you want. You're going to trim the fat around the things that you want. And if you can do that, you'll be able to develop a savings plan. And then you'll be able to implement and maintain it. And what's important about this is that when it comes to behavior, a lot of the time, the reason that we're not saving is because we don't have like well-defined goals. We don't have goals that are important to us. We're not being accountable to those goals. We're not being accountable to our family. So having it written down, setting those goals, that's going to really drive it. SMART goals. I know we're doing this in Gamma, but it's saying, hey, make it measurable. Is it attainable? Be specific. All of the above. If you can create those goals that way and dig deeper, that's what's going to really drive you to make that shift and keep creating those new pots of money that you can keep rolling into other places and spaces. And then we're gonna talk about what it looks like. Any questions, anything else so far before I shift into the savings design? What I love about this is the simplest, easiest way to save. It doesn't take any real strategy. It doesn't take really much discipline. I teach it to anyone who's open to learning it, and it's so easy to remember. 20, 60, 20. Whenever I get paid, doesn't matter where that money comes from, that first 20% off the top needs to go to future me, because I care about that person. I care about what they need. I care about what they want. I care about their dreams. So I'm going to do that for her. I'm going to save 20% upfront. Some of you are already doing that with your 401k. Some of you are already splitting your paycheck, which is a great way to get around behavior. Split your paycheck. Send a portion straight into your savings account. Your savings account needs to be an account where you actually can save. So if you are a person who has a savings account that you might move money back and forth from your savings and checking constantly, if you're a person who might Venmo and PayPal and Cash App and then just make up for it later, what you want to recognize is these institutions create these apps that make it so easy for you to move money. Apple Pay, Samsung Pay. It's so easy to spend money. It's way easier than swiping a card, because you can forget your wallet, but you never forget your phone, right? So be mindful of that. If you know that's you, find a way to save outside and away from those other apps. So I use a credit union that I won't name them, but I'm going to tell you they don't have great technology. They don't have a lot of branches. So if I want that money, I usually have to go to the bank, and it's super inconvenient. So not great marketing for them, but it definitely helps me save. So I do it. I also use an online high yield savings account. So same thing, I don't necessarily have that app connected where I'm able to just move money. It doesn't work like that in my system that I've got set up. So if you're going to save, be serious about it, be disciplined about it, do those things that can help you defend against your behavior. The next segment is 60%. So that is your fixed spending. So anything that is a regular dollar amount, your rent, your mortgage, your utilities, your insurance, your phone bill, anything like that, internet, those are usually going to be in your fixed spending, things you can't get around. If you're an undergrad, I always recommend to my lovely members at the Florida Gulf Coast University, that they include their whatever they pay for their dues in that, because it's a fixed amount that they know they have to spend every month or every period of time. So fun fact that I'm going to make a fact. It's not great if your housing is over 30% of your fixed spending. It's okay if that's a trade-off that you're willing to make, but in theory, you want to keep your housing, rent, mortgage within 30%. So for people who are looking to move, sometimes that question comes up: how do I know what I can afford? What you can afford probably falls nicely within 30% of your income. If you're like me and you live in St. Pete, Florida, you're like, what does that even mean? I don't know. It means most of us need roommates because cost of living is really high compared to our salaries, but that's what that is. Nidhi is asking about recommending a high yield savings account. I'm not going to make a recommendation, but I will just suggest that you can go online and take a look. There's tons of them. They're going to offer you based on what you think you can contribute. They're going to offer you a rate. So I would just look through them and see which one looks great to you. I picked one that's just easy to use. When I picked it, the interest rate was terrible, but it was just really easy to use, so I went with it. So no real recommendation, but that's what I think is kind of an easy way to find what might be right for you. And then the last 20% is your discretionary spending. That's your fun money. Whatever you do that builds out your lifestyle, that's it. Gas, groceries, hanging out, things you buy for the kids, if you're Auntie Yo-Yo and you're the rich Auntie Yo-Yo, those things. What this is about, saving by design, it's about creating choices for yourself. So a couple of things are going to come up throughout your lifetime, and most of them are not taking place today if you're a person under 60. So I'm going to start from the top: asset location. You want to have choices on where you can put your money. Liquidity. You want to have the ability to have access to some of your money. But there's always a trade-off if you're going to have access to it. Time horizon is how much time you have before you're going to need that money. So if it's retirement, for example, and I want to retire at 60, I have a 22-year time horizon before I'm going to be there. If I wanted to retire sooner, let's say at 40, I have a 2-year, almost a little less than 2 years time horizon. So it's really about when you need the money, and you want to have choices there. Taxes. Everywhere you hold money, there's always going to be some level of taxes that you're responsible for. So how you pay those taxes and when you pay those taxes, that can be a choice. It's not a choice whether or not you pay the taxes, however. Your health. You want to have choices in how you're able to provide for your own health care. You want to have choices if your health fails. You want to have choices if you live really long, your longevity. You don't want to run out of money. Medicine's getting better and better. I have a 92-year-old grandfather, and his mom lived to 95. I might live forever. So running out of money, big problem. I don't want to have that happen. And then the last choice is your legacy, what you're going to leave behind. You want to have that choice normally. And usually if you had a choice, you would not leave debt. So that's why saving by design becomes super important for you. And this is what it looks like over time. So you're looking at a graph. I actually took this from something I used to teach. A lot of financial planners use a similar concept, but I built it out. And the idea here is that on the bottom axis here is the timeline of when you might need that money. So the first bucket, you might need that money within 0 to 5 years from now. Second bucket, 5 to 20 years from now. Third bucket, 20 plus years from now. So essentially all your retirement funds. I have no idea how old everyone in here is. So hopefully you're following me here on this, but generally it still works. On the opposite axis, that y-axis, we're looking at the amount saved. So in that first bucket, that's your emergency fund. You want to have 3 to 6 months of your fixed expenses saved. And that's saying if I have a 2-income household, I could probably get away with 3 months savings. If I have a one or single person household, I probably want to have 6 months. A lot of my clients who had children or a loved one with special needs, or maybe they were a caregiver for a parent, a lot of them chose to keep more in savings. Even though they know it's challenging, they're up against inflation risk. They just felt like the need to have liquidity and access was more important. So all of these accounts here are essentially dollars that might fit into that category. So you're checking your savings, CDs, money market, stocks, bonds, mutual funds. They're all liquid. They're all taxable. Some of them keep up with inflation, some of them don't. None of it is asset protected. So if you were in some type of legal bind, if anything that a judge could place a lien against, essentially that account, anything in that bucket could apply. So that's another important reason why estate planning can be important. The next bucket is that midlife bucket. And I like this icon because this is where we're putting in the work. It's easy to put, money into your 401k, but getting the majority of our wealth into this middle bucket, it's going to take some time and some work. Inside of this bucket, you might have your Roth IRAs or your Roth 401k or 403bs. You might have a 529 education plan or ABLE plan. PLI stands for permanent life insurance. You might have some of that. What is unique? I'll answer this for you, Lizzie. This bucket, essentially you're using post-tax dollars to contribute. The 529 does have some other tax incentives, however. The money is going to grow tax deferred, so you are not paying taxes on that Roth IRA. And then when you pull the money out, presuming you do not pull that money out early or without any of these exceptions, that which you would discuss with your tax person, you'd be able to pull that money out tax-free. And that is why we want to try to get the majority of our wealth there, because who knows? And if you know, put that number in there, and you probably are the one who's going to win the lottery too. But if you know what taxes are going to look like, you're pretty much the genie. So when it comes to building these buckets, the difference between the middle bucket and that last bucket is that you don't know how much money in that last bucket actually belongs to you. So what that is essentially your retirement accounts, generally speaking. So your 401ks, if you're a federal employee, you have a TSP. Your TSP also could have Roth too, which would be in that middle bucket. Your 403bs, 457s, IRAs, SEP IRAs, simple IRAs, your solo 401ks, some of your post-tax contributions, annuities. All of these are essentially accounts that you're going to have age 59 and a half rule. And if you pull that money out prior to that, you're going to accept a 10% penalty. None of the money taxes have not been paid on this bucket. So you were able to get your tax incentives while you were working. You were able to tax defer all that money throughout those years. But when you get towards your retirement years, anytime you pull money out, there's taxes that will be due. What that amount is, you're going to want to talk with your tax professional. You guessed it. That amount we won't necessarily know today. But generally speaking, it's about the value of the account and your age and the actuarial tables that they use at the time to determine that. So generally speaking, you want to have enough to pay the taxes on these accounts available. What's RMD stands for are required minimum distributions. So once you're 73, if you haven't started paying taxes on these dollars in this bucket, the IRS essentially forces you to. Doesn't matter if you don't need the money, they're going to force you to pull that money out in order to pay taxes. In addition to that, you'll also have a 50% penalty. So the point of this is that you want to be able to have choices. You want to be able to have as many tools on your tool belt. You can't wait until you're at retirement to try to collect all of those tools. You can, but you shouldn't. I'll say you shouldn't wait. And if you are saving in an account that has money that you have not paid taxes on, you want to make sure that as you get to planning for your retirement, you're accounting for that. Fun fact, Social Security income is also taxable to you in retirement. Yeah, there's always, I think the interesting thing about money is that most of the conversation is about taxes or what we might have to pay once we actually get to saving. A lot of the time we have a barrier between debt and savings, but once we get in there, all you start thinking about is the taxes. So we want to make sure we're having conversations with our financial professionals to make sure that we're able to address that. All right. So I'm at my accountability shade here. You want to actually, can we turn on the lights? No, go ahead and talk through this one while she does that.
Yeah, I'm working on that now.
Okay. So I love this slide. The quote essentially, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And that's really why I'm here today. I think there's so much value in sharing these things that weren't shared with us, fall 2005 when I was a new member, or when I was younger, when I first was coming out of college. And all of this information, had I heard it sooner, a day sooner, would have been so much valuable. But what I also noticed is that the people, the families, the friend groups that do best in financial planning, they're doing it together. My lady lawyers, they're having conversations about their starting salaries. How much are we earning compared to our peers? And they're making that conversation. They're trying to lean in on it. And I think it's so important. And I think we have the ability within Gamma to also do that with each other. So the first piece of accountability is having that meaningful why. Why am I doing this? Why does any of this really even matter? As Kimmy turns the lights on, you're going to look around, you'll see the names in the webinar. So now you know there's someone here today that heard exactly what you heard. And maybe, oh, no worries, Nicole. I'll whisper. So maybe if you're able to set up with each other, you can do some biweekly check-ins. Hey, how are you going? How are your goals going? What's your action plan? What step are you at? How much progress are you making? Maybe you're not making progress, but having someone to share that with that is just not moving the way I thought it was going to move. Like, that's a great conversation and a great relationship. Finding your financial professional, very quickly, it's not a transaction, it's a relationship. This person is wondering if they might be able to join you in what starts off as a tough conversation. They want to know your goals, they want to know your dreams, they want to know your fears, they want to know how they can help. They're not ever sure how much they should put forward because they don't want to scare you away. But they want the best for you. So having that conversation and recognizing that, when our clients go through a hardship, they lose a family member, they lose a baby, they lose a friend, they lose a job. COVID was really hard. People losing jobs. Being able to have someone that you can call who's not going to get too wrapped up in the emotions, but can give you that solid advice about what you should do with your money right now, I'd say that's priceless. So look for that person that you could see, not saying you have to invite them to your wedding, or that, they're going to be present when your baby's born, but people do. And a lot of it's because if you passed away, they'd drop everything, they'd clear their calendar, and they'd show up for your loved one that same day. So otherwise, you want to read, you want to listen, you want to watch. There are so many people with these platforms sharing content. Not every person on TikTok or YouTube is going to be, necessarily qualified, but you develop your own opinions. There's so much out there. There are podcasts. I'm coming up, I'm going to share a couple of ideas with you, but be a student. There's so much to learn. There's no end to how much finance can show you and how much you'll be able to reveal for yourself when you get there. Otherwise, I think having a family meeting to discuss your goals and how they impact each other's ability to accomplish those goals. It lets you get into the hard conversations, but then it also gives people that ability to see, long-term what it is that you're really building outside of work or outside of the time you spend with the sorority. Like, I think it makes a meaningful goal, and when people see you doing it, it will inspire them. Turn the laser pen off. All right, so in summary, just be mindful of the implications of borrowed money. Start budgeting, do it more than, a month or every quarter. If you're not great with your money, do it every week if you need to. But you have to do what's required to set yourself up to save successfully. Being mindful of your expenses. There's actually, interesting enough, in Greek Track, there's a spreadsheet that kind of lets you reconcile the account. So it shows you the cash flow every time you spend something. You could literally, if you don't look online and find one, you could take that one and create it. And it will show you how you're spending, and you can project what's left of your paycheck. So how much I'm able to save if I do 20%. If I put in all my fixed expenses, this is what I have left. It's a great way to visualize your money. Save first and spend last. Determine your best insurance plan, whether or not it's going to meet your needs. And I go back to that red flag. A huge red flag is if you're paying for a lot of insurance, but you don't have the actual amount that you need. Find out what their compensation structure and amount suits you. So that's about your interviewing when you're negotiating a role or a salary. If you understand steps 1 through 5, you understand what your financial needs are. And you need to make sure when you go into an interview, you're asking for that money. They don't need to know why you need it or what your expenses look like, but you need to be asking for the money that's going to allow you to save. So the right salary lets you take care of your family and get to retirement. And then you always want to make sure you're reassessing the needs of your family, because over time, things are going to change. Never too late or too early to stop and take a break and look at the plan again. Usually I would do reviews every year with a client, just to make sure we're on track. If there were things that we didn't get to, that were still important or still a goal, but we just got bogged down, or maybe they didn't have the capacity for, we pick right up where we left off every time. And these are my good behavior reads. So a lot of, I think, behavior is about our mindset. So all of these books I've read, Power of Zero, I'm going to start with that one just to give you an idea. This one's essentially about taxes, the future of taxes, retirement. A lot of retirement planners leverage David McKnight. He's a CPA. He has a podcast. Do I have Dave Ramsey? I don't put Dave Ramsey on here, but essentially he has a podcast, David McKnight. He has a YouTube page. He has books. He has so much information out there to help you gain perspective. If you have time, that is definitely a podcast or YouTube channel to just watch and review. If you're on YouTube anywhere, or you're on one of those channels, just check him out. Rich Dad, Poor Dad, that's probably everyone's first book that they say changes the way that they view wealth and their role in it. So it's an easy read. It's not that this guy is super financial or whatever. He just makes sure that he's able to illustrate his story and how that story can be relevant for most of us. The one thing, finance can be a really big topic, and you have pretty much 1,000 priorities every day. You know that your finances are important to you. You know that it's something that you can't do without, but how do you prioritize that amongst the 10 million other things you need to do? So when you start thinking about those goals that you've written down, just focus on what's the one thing I could do today that would move the needle. And if I do that one thing, then I've got my W. That's my win. 10% happier, the home edit. The home edit is not about getting more things to be organized, but I do think it's about revisioning how you view your belongings. If there was a way to do less, to be less consumer based, I think that's a good book to help you kind of redevelop your philosophy. Atomic Habits, you called that, Nydia. Awesome book. If you can get it on like a audiobook, if you're not a real reader, audiobooks are great. It's definitely a way to go and get some perspective on creating these habits. If you have an accountability partner, maybe the two of you could read that book and challenge each other on that. Brave, Not Perfect. There's this thing about women, and I know it is a thing about gammas because I know so many of you. A lot of us really struggle with perfectionism. For whatever reasons that which we grew up or whatever career we might have chosen, I think one thing that is important, I'm saying all this stuff to you, but I'm not perfect. I don't have all the answers, and I'm not always perfect in my own behavior. But I think it's important for us to be courageous in the effort, to challenge each other, to speak up, to have these conversations. So, if you haven't been doing all of these things, or if you're not in a great spot, or if nobody's ever shared these ideas, or you don't have that literacy, like there's no shame, there's no problem with it. Everyone has a starting point. So if you can read, if you can watch a video, that might be your starting point, but you will definitely level up. Everyone does it. It's just one day it's going to mean more, and that's the day you'll take action. And then the last one is I'll talk through is hustle harder, hustle smarter. Curtis Jackson. I was actually hoping there would be like one New Yorker, Jamaica Queens, maybe that might read this quote for me. But comfort, I've learned, is a dream killer. It saps our ambition, blinds our vision, promotes complacency. His book, essentially, to me, is very much 50 Cent in that sense of what we thought of the rapper, the actor, but he writes from a place of a business perspective. And when it comes to money, I think that is the way you want to view yourself. Your finances are your business. How you run them, who you partner with, all of that matters. The time you spend earning it, the time you spend spending it, it all matters. So recognizing if you can find people who have ambition, who have vision, who are dreamers, you probably won't fall into that habit of complacency. Complacency is consumerism. And that's my last slide, but I wanted to stop really, really quickly and just take the time to note Kimmy. Kimmy's definitely bringing some really good value to the sorority, I've noticed since her tenure in this role. So if you don't mind dropping your favorite emoji, pink and purple, whatever that might be, just to show a little bit of gratitude to Kimmy for what she's doing. I haven't really seen it this way, and I definitely appreciate that you're bringing this type of information, bringing this type of variety to us. It's so much different from what we're used to. So just thanks so much, Kimmy, for thinking of everyone, for thinking of me to share this. So my last quote here is says, live a life full of humility, gratitude, intellectual curiosity, and never stop learning.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And I'm glad you guys are enjoying this webinar series. It's everything that I really was hoping for. And I'm really happy that you guys are loving it. And thank you for hosting and actually giving us all this information. I'm actually about to go straight to a financial advisor this week because now my mind is like, hold up. Um, but I really do agree. I really do appreciate you, your wealth of knowledge, and everyone that joined us on the call. Really happy that you guys are here and that we're able to do something that kind of helps us in the long run.
If any of you think this would be helpful to your entity, your association, I'm definitely happy to speak and to maybe take a less broad approach in a topic if that's helpful. But if that's helpful to you, reach out to Kimmy. She'll get you connected. You can also connect with me here on LinkedIn.
Thank you. I'm going to stop the recording real quick.
All right.